Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most influential and enduring rock groups from the United Kingdom. Solo artists or singer-songwriters will be reserved for another day.
Hold me closer, tiny dancer.
Number 20, Oasis. Anyway, here's Oasis. The recent announcement of the group's reunion and impending tour has gone a long way in forgiving the Gallagher siblings' past reputation for bad behaviour.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you.
Nostalgia can be a brightly coloured beast after all, and the time has been kind to Oasis songs like Don't Look Back in Anger and, yes, Wonderwall. The latter in particular has lived beyond meme status to become one of the most fondly remembered tunes of the 90s. This was no accident either, since that song remains wonderfully composed and artfully executed.
I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now.
Sure, Oasis have, let's say, borrowed wholesale from the Beatles' musical playbook over the years, but it's a darned good trick that bears repeating for legions of misty-eyed fans.
And so Sally can wait. She knows it's too late.
Number 19, Def Leppard. It's unfair to label Britain's Def Leppard solely as a creative voice for the lighter side of heavy metal from the 1980s. The origins of this Sheffield group actually date back to the late 70s, and Def Leppard's early material helped solidify the new wave of British heavy metal. Records like High and Dry were detailed and textured affairs, while 1983's Pyromania successfully combined heavy metal with a somewhat more pop sensibility. This was melodic and accessible metal that nevertheless retained aggression in certain places. Songs like Billy's Got a Gun, Die Hard the Hunter, and Stage Fright proved that heavy music could break through into the mainstream while also sounding righteous as hell. Number 18, The Clash. Opinions differ with regards to which group was first out of the gate to bring punk rock to the masses. What isn't usually up for debate, however, is the importance of The Clash to this movement.
Calling to the faraway towns. Now war is declared and battle come down.
These Londoners brought everything to the table with regards to influences, ushering in musical moves from reggae, dub and ska, and making them into a sound that was percolating with aggression. The Clash was one of those few early punk bands that transcended the musical limitations of that genre to become a worldwide influence. This was no mean feat, but instead spoke to just how much fans of The Clash felt that they were the only band that matters. Number 17, Depeche Mode. The world of electronic music can take on many forms and embody multiple faces. Depeche Mode from Essex frankly defies characterisation, yet varying words often come to mind when describing their sound. Dark is one, while erotic is another. Yes, frontman Dave Garn always seemed to radiate sexuality whenever he took the stage with Depeche Mode.
Words like violence break the silence, come crashing in.
Meanwhile, bandmate Martin Gore's songwriting skill always ensured that a certain, almost transgressive malevolence bubbled just below the surface. It's honestly remarkable that Depeche Mode's music, as thick and viscous as it is, has also managed to become so melodic and captivating. It speaks volumes to how the pioneering group was able to mould electronica to their will. Number 16, Dire Straits. There isn't a lot of bravado when it comes to the humble yet transfixing music of London's Dire Straits.
Later on the TV, talk about the Virgin Mary.
The group managed to take a pub rock style that's intrinsically very modest and bring it to arenas all over the world. This was thanks primarily to the songwriting and guitar playing of frontman Mark Knopfler.
Check out Guitar George. He knows all the chords.
The man's finger-picking style vacillates from bluesy and raw to intimate and free-flowing, like the gentlest of rivers. There's also a lot of emotion to Knopfler's playing that allowed the music of Dire Straits to touch a lot of different music fans.
We are the sultans of swing.
Their albums are textured, melodic affairs that also service the song first, while still allowing moments for Knopfler's guitar to cry and sing.
We're fools to make war on our brothers in arms.
Number 15, Judas Priest. They remain one of the foremost names in British heavy metal, a rock institution that's still going strong today.
Breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law.
Judas Priest emerged from the halcyon days of classic rock in the 70s to become a pioneering force for riff-laden metallic might. Their 80s heyday saw Priest embody the twin guitar aesthetic, while the 90s saw their Painkiller LP embrace thrash sounds of the day. Priest was also the home of Rob Halford, a defining voice for heavy metal whose insane range and immense power served as an inspiration for legions of singers in his wake. The spirit of Birmingham's metallic pedigree lives on through artists like Judas Priest, and their contributions to musical heaviness will never be forgotten. Number 14, Deep Purple. There are a number of artists that usually come up in conversation when it comes to claiming which was the first heavy metal band.
She's the best girl that I've ever had. Sometimes you're gonna make me feel so bad.
Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and Judas Priest are chief among these names, together with the magnificent Deep Purple. These Londoners have endured multiple lineup and stylistic shifts over the years, from the Mark I era from the 60s, pioneering heavy psychedelia.
Listen, hush, hush. I thought I heard it calling my name now.
Meanwhile, it would be Purple's Mark II and Mark III lineups that would focus more upon guitarist Ritchie Blackmore's dizzying riffs, John Lord's heavy organ, and Ian Pace's frenetic drumming. This musical trinity would play faster and louder than ever before, while singers like Ian Gillan and David Coverdale brought the howl and the blues to an international audience.
Smoke on the water, a fire in the sky.
Number 13, Genesis. 2022 may have brought an end to the progressive rock journey of Genesis, but their legacy remains etched in musical stone. It was back in the late 60s when Surrey schoolyard friendships transitioned into musical experimentation. Genesis achieved prog rock dominance during the following decade, thanks to lineups that included legends Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins, alongside guitarist Mike Rutherford and keyboardist Tony Banks. Genesis would become more commercially successful upon the departure of Gabriel, but their progressive spirit remains, with albums like Invisible Touch and their self-titled effort always retaining compositional complexity.
So say you'll help me, mama.
Simply stated, Genesis was one of the best to ever do it, and helped prove that prog wasn't a dirty word. Number 12, The Smiths. Time has been incredibly kind to the music of The Smiths.
Haunted bicycle on a hillside desolate.
This Manchester group tended to write short songs, yet their focus upon compelling arrangements and memorable hooks proved that poppy didn't necessarily need to mean disposable. Guitarist Johnny Marr's licks jingled and jangled atop Andy Rourke's precision bass work, while Morrissey's inimitable croon was impossible to resist.
And heaven knows I'm miserable now.
The latter's lyrics were also known for their biting wit and almost sartorial manner of dressing up Smith's songs in coats of elegant malevolence. Then there's How Soon Is Now, the outlier dance hit that helped underline the group's influence upon the goth, post-punk, and alternative rock subgenres. It was all truly great stuff that stood the test of time.
Just like everybody else does.
Number 11, The Cure. The story of The Cure is similar to that of the Smiths, with regards to their wide net of international fandom. This group from West Sussex also emerged from the 1970s post-punk era, but also developed their own insanely influential style of darkness. The Cure brought goth rock out of the black and into the light with some startling commercial appeal.
However far away, I will always love you.
This was a band that wrote deep and marvellously interesting records, yet each one also had songs that could be played onto the radio.
Show me how you do that trick, the one that makes me scream, she said.
This ebb and flow could have only been achieved by a group as talented as The Cure, one with true songwriting chops. Meanwhile, Robert Smith's intense and arresting personal style helped codify a gothic image that still stands to this day.
Lost and lonely, you, just like heaven.
Number 10, The Police. Some of our younger Mojoholics may not correlate the recent version of Sting with punk rock. However, back in 1978, he and his fellow Londoners of The Police burst onto the scene with an eclectic debut album.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light.
Working both as the lead vocalist and primary songwriter, Sting touched on his literary influences as the band proceeded to deliver 4 more innovative productions, within a 5-year span leading up to their most famous hit, Every Breath You Take.
Can't you see, you belong to me.
In essence, The Police could rock out with the best of their fellow post-punk artists. However, their cultured aesthetics ultimately produced a universal appeal. Number 9, Radiohead. A staple of the 90s alternative sound, this band actually formed in the mid-80s while attending a boarding school in Abingdon.
When you were here before, couldn't look you in the eye.
Originally known as On a Friday, the crew looked at a Talking Heads song for their new name, and when Creep hit the radio in 1992, Tom York and company solidified themselves as one of the most promising bands around.
But I'm a creep.
Of course, transformative albums like The Bends and OK Computer would cement Radiohead as international stars, while the lyrical proficiency and melancholic sound touched a nerve with Generation X. And perhaps to everyone's surprise, they managed to not only stay together, but deliver another decade of iconic indie albums through the 2000s and beyond.
Just 'cause you feel it.
Number 8, Iron Maiden. Here's a bunch of new wave Brits, albeit of a slightly different order than the pop sounds of the early 80s. Born and bred in Leighton, England, Iron Maiden took their name from the iconic Alexandre Dumas novel The Man in the Iron Mask, and dropped their self-titled debut in April of 1980. Decades and dozens of albums later, Iron Maiden has become the most influential band of the heavy metal genre, and their mascot remains an unmistakable fixture of the musical culture. They set the standard for a new era of musicians and never stopped thrashing. Number 7, Black Sabbath. Before there was Maiden, there was Black Sabbath. Based in Birmingham, England, this group joined forces in the late 60s and fused together a blend of classic rock with something a bit more heavy. In fact, Ozzy Osbourne and his bandmates innovated the heavy metal genre and kicked off the 70s with a string of albums that would provide an alternative to the more pop-friendly sounds of the time. Back in the day, it wasn't necessarily the cool kids that were listening to Sabbath, but as it turns out, that's exactly who they were. Independent and anti-establishment, this wrecking crew changed the game for aspiring metalhead musicians everywhere. Number 6. The Who. It's somewhat of a rock cliche to destroy a guitar on stage, but it was this band that first embraced the form of auto-destructive art.
I die before I get old. Talking about my generation.
Undoubtedly one of the most influential rock bands ever formed, The Who emerged during the British invasion, and their outlaw antics stood them apart from the other musicians exhibiting more, appropriate behaviour.
Trying to cause a big sensation.
They closed off the 60s with the groundbreaking rock opera Tommy, and they later established themselves as one of the quintessential rock bands with a full decade's worth of personal albums for the more album-orientated rock fans of the early Rolling Stone era. Number 5. Queen. Today, American Idol runner-up Adam Lambert fronts this operatic fraternity. However, the late Freddie Mercury is the undeniable face of Queen, and one of the most recognisable faces of rock music.
Buddy, you're a boy, make a big noise, playing in the street, gonna be a big man someday.
With a plethora of popular British rock to draw their sound from, this band ultimately found a niche through the personality exhibited in both their lyrics and the deeply dramatic aesthetics of their evolving stage shows.
200 degrees, that's why they call me Mr. Fahrenheit.
Beginning with their self-titled debut in 1973, Queen remained the grand masters of musical opera, all the way to 1995's Maiden Heaven, the final studio release upon the untimely death of their legendary frontman.
Nothing really matters to me.
Number 4. Pink Floyd. Like many other progressive bands of the late 60s and 70s, it would be a crime to simply label these Londoners as acid rockers. But what do you expect when you make albums that make listeners drift away into their dreams? The average music fan will immediately associate Pink Floyd with The Wall or The Dark Side of the Moon, and with good reason. But truth be told, the multifaceted band released 4 late 60s classics that set the tone for the equally mind-blowing productions of the 70s. Pink Floyd created an atmospheric experience to be enjoyed with no moderation necessary. Well, musically speaking, that is. Number 3. The Rolling Stones. No one here gets out alive, except Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. The American blues originally influenced this band of rockers, and when the British invasion occurred during the early 60s, you know that they were at the forefront. As the most enduring British rock band of the last 50 years, the Rolling Stones were arguably most popular from 1965 to 1980, delivering hard-hitting rock and roll licks that highlighted the band's personality.
I'm jumping jack flashes and gas.
And while their musical output has been rather tame since the 1990s, it doesn't really matter given they continue to inspire by touring the world year after year. Number 2. Led Zeppelin. Yet another classic rock band influenced by American blues music, this London group applied a heavy dose of psychedelia to their sound in order to mystify fellow musicians and certainly their fans. In other words, they could wail, and there wasn't a weak spot in the group.
They asked no quarter.
With each member coming from other notable projects, Led Zeppelin was a fine-tuned machine when they formed in 1968, and within just 3 years, they released 4 explosive albums that firmly took a hold over the younger demographic.
Yes, there are 2 bars you can go by, but in the long run.
In a time when rock fans pledged their allegiance to one particular band, everybody loved them some Led Zeppelin, even if they claimed otherwise. Unfortunately, the music ended with the 1980 death of drummer John Bonham.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Number 1, the Beatles. Okay, you all expected these guys to be our number 1 choice, and there's good reason for that. It's because they're bleeping awesome. Unless you actually lived through the Beatles music of the 1960s, you could forget about what pop culture tells you to believe and simply experience the music yourself.
Nothing is real, nothing to get hung about.
Album by album, track by track. There's no other band that influenced rock and roll like these lads from Liverpool, and they were already a well-rehearsed act when they first arrived in America.
I read the news today, oh boy.
John, Paul, Ringo, George. For 8 momentous years, the Beatles functioned on a higher level than most and changed the world as we know it. Did we miss your favourite British rock act? Let us know in the comments.
Good night, now it's time to go home.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.